Hello and welcome. During this video, we're going to talk about what abortion risk is, how to accurately assess and assign a client's abortion risk, why it's important to track, and when and where the abortion risk is recorded. So let's go ahead and get started. First, a client's abortion risk simply refers to the client's likelihood to get an abortion. The client's abortion risk is assessed using two different measures, the client advocate's assessment and the client's stated intentions. So let's talk about the difference between these two. The client advocate's assessment is what the client advocate determines about the likelihood of a positive pregnancy test client getting an abortion. The client's stated intentions, on the other hand, represents what the client states regarding her intentions of getting an abortion. When assessing abortion risk, a client advocate can assign one of three risk levels: abortion-minded, abortion-vulnerable, or likely to carry to term. Let's refer to CareNet's definitions to help us better understand each risk level. First, you would assess a client as abortion-minded if she appears to be planning or intending to obtain an abortion or meets one or more of the following criteria. Number one, she's seeking information as to how to obtain an abortion. Number two, she has an abortion scheduled regardless of how tentative she seems. Or number three, the abortion procedure has already been initiated, as in the introduction of laminaria. Next, you would assess a client as abortion vulnerable if she, by continuing her pregnancy, faces obstacles that she may feel incapable of handling or may be unwilling to experience. For example, if she meets one or more of these criteria, you would assess her as abortion vulnerable. Number one, she has not eliminated the possibility of abortion. Number two, she is being pressured to have or consider an abortion. Number three, she's undecided, and this may be expressed verbally or marked on her intake form. Number four, she's against abortion, however, the pregnant woman has a medical condition that she feels may affect the pregnancy. Or number five, she does not meet all of the criteria for likely to carry to term or any of the criteria for abortion-minded. Lastly, you would assess a client as likely to carry to term if number one, the client has stated that she has made a decision to carry to term, and she has no apparent medical condition that will affect her pregnancy, and she has support from all significant influences in her life, such as her partner, parents, close friends, and others. Okay, now the second measure that's used to assess abortion risk, the client's stated intentions, is also tracked using three risk levels. And those are abortion, meaning that the client states she intends to get an abortion; undecided, and here the client states that she's undecided on whether to carry to term or get an abortion; or intends to carry to term, and this is when she states that she intends to carry the pregnancy to term. Now notice that the client advocate's assessment and the client's stated intentions may not always be the same. For example, if a client states that she intends to carry her baby to term, but also tells you that her boyfriend is pressuring her to abort, her stated intentions would be marked as intends to carry to term because that's what she said, but because of the pressure to abort due to lack of support from her boyfriend, her assessment would be marked as abortion vulnerable. So why is it important to accurately assess and record this information? Well, first, it allows you to accurately identify your clients who are at risk of having an abortion. Second, by being able to measure where and when changes to the client's abortion risk level occurred, you can better identify if a particular program or service may have impacted the change of decision. Third, you are able to accurately demonstrate your center's impact by reporting on lives saved and changed abortion views. And fourth, many centers are required to report this information to national groups such as CareNet and for different grants, etc. So now that we understand what abortion risk is, how it's measured, and why it's important to accurately record, let's talk about where and when the different risk levels are recorded. To do that, let's look at a tool in Centerpiece called the At-Risk Timeline that displays all of this information on one easy-to-read page. To access the At-Risk Timeline, let's go to Centerpiece and first click on the Client tab. Next, I'm going to search for my client by entering in a few letters of her last name and then her first name, and then I'll click Apply. The clients that match the criteria are displayed. I'm going to click right here to open the client's electronic chart. Now, to view the at-risk timeline, I'm going to first need to open one of her client cases. Notice that she has two cases, so I'm going to click here to open her most recent case, which is case number 2. Once opened, notice these case-specific tabs are displayed. To view the at-risk timeline, I'll simply click right here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and close the contact information, and I'm going to click here to close the taskbar so we have a little bit more viewable space. And let's first talk about the different stages of the at-risk timeline, because this will show us when and where our different abortion risk levels are recorded. As you can see, there are 4 stages in the at-risk timeline. Each stage represents a particular service that the client received during their pregnancy support cycle at your clinic. Each stage also displays the abortion risk levels that were recorded when the data entry for those services was completed. The risk levels displayed in Stage 1, also known as the initial assessment, were determined when the client case was first opened and were recorded on the case form. Let's click here to open the case form that was previously entered in. I'll scroll down to the bottom and you can see the abortion risk assessment questions and answers right here under the office use only section of the form. Now again, because this assessment is the first or initial assessment, these 2 risk levels set the baseline of the client's abortion risk assessment. Okay, so let's close out of this and move on to the next stage in the timeline. The risk levels displayed in Stage 2 were recorded on the pregnancy test form once a positive pregnancy test was confirmed. After a positive pregnancy test, clients receive options counseling and pregnancy support options from your center. If any of these services influence the client's abortion risk levels, either the client advocate's assessment or the client's stated intentions, those changes are reflected here. Otherwise, the values should match the initial assessment in the prior stage. Now, please note, because you can have multiple pregnancy tests entered in for the same case, the risk levels that are counted here in Stage 2 will be the risk levels from the most recent positive pregnancy test. I'll click here to open the most recent pregnancy test, and I'm going to scroll down to the office use only section and notice the client advocate's assessment here and the client's stated intentions here. Okay, so let's close out of this and take a look at Stage 3. The risk levels displayed here in Stage 3 are recorded in the sonogram form. This stage allows you to track changes in the client's risk levels after receiving a sonogram. Now again, if the sonogram influenced either the client advocate's assessment or the client's stated intentions, those changes are reflected here. Otherwise, the values should match the pregnancy test in the prior stage. Now, if your center doesn't perform sonograms, that's okay. You would just skip Stage 3. I'm going to click here on the sonogram form, and you can see the abortion risk assessment information right here. Now, just like the pregnancy test, you can enter in multiple sonogram forms, and the risk level from the most recent sonogram form is what's counted here in Stage 3. Okay, now so far we've reviewed stages 1 through 3, and you've learned that the information that is displayed in these stages is recorded on the case form, the pregnancy test form, and the sonogram form. You probably also noticed that those particular forms had already been entered into Centerpiece, and the at-risk timeline was simply displaying the abortion risk information that was collected on those different forms. I point that out because I want to make sure that you understand that there is no additional data entry that you have to do in order to fill out the first 3 stages of the at-risk timeline. You just follow the regular data entry workflow that we covered in the previous videos, titled Data Entry for Client Advocates and Data Entry for Medical Personnel. The timeline simply helps you see all of the different abortion risk levels that were recorded at each stage, and it allows you to easily see any changes over time. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move on to stage 4. The risk levels for stage 4 are recorded in a form called the Final Assessment Form. The Final Assessment Form is the only form in the timeline that you won't enter in during the regular data entry workflow that we've reviewed in the previous videos. This form was specifically designed to allow client advocates to follow up with their clients after their visit to confirm and record both the client's final stated intentions and the client advocate's final assessment. Notice that the client advocate's final assessment here was recorded as abortion vulnerable, and the client's final stated intentions was recorded as intends to carry. I'm going to click here to open the form, and you can see that this is a short form that records the date, the staff or volunteer's name, the method of contact, and then the abortion risk assessment information here, and any comments right here. Again, if any changes were made to either the client advocate's assessment or the client's stated intentions, they're recorded here. Otherwise, the values should match what was recorded in the previous stage. Now, remember that I said that this is the only form that isn't part of the regular data entry workflow that we covered in the previous 2 videos. And that's because this form was created to be filled out after the client's visit or visits to the center. Therefore, in order to ensure that this form is filled out and the final abortion risk assessment information is recorded, many centers set follow-up tasks to remind their staff or volunteers to follow up with clients at some point after their visit. For more information about how to set follow-up tasks, please watch the How to Assign Client File Follow-up video in the Video Training Center. In addition to assigning follow-up tasks, in the next section I'll show you a couple of reports that you can run to efficiently identify and follow up with at-risk clients. Before we do that, however, let's talk about the current assessment status information right here. The first thing that you see is the case number. Next, you're going to see the client advocate's assessment from the most recent stage of the at-risk timeline. Now, since this client is in stage 4, it will display the most recent information for stage 4. Also notice that the assessment status is color-coded. Since our client's most recent risk level is abortion vulnerable, its background color is yellow. If, however, I click Edit and change the value from abortion vulnerable to likely to carry to term, and then click Save and Close, notice that the color changes to green, showing me that she is no longer at risk of aborting. Now, I also want to show you what the highest risk level, abortion-minded, looks like. To do that, I'll click Edit and once more change the client advocate's assessment to abortion-minded. I'll click Save and Close, and notice this time that the background color is red, showing me that she is at the highest risk of aborting. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click Edit, and I'll change the value back to abortion vulnerable, and I'll click Save and Close. Now, I also want to quickly point out that you can enter in as many final assessment forms as you like, and the most recent one is what will be used. To add a new final assessment form, simply click Add New right here, or you can click to open the taskbar and add it from the taskbar by clicking here. Okay. So now that we've reviewed the at-risk timeline, let's discuss a few reports that will help you follow up with your at-risk clients. First, I previously mentioned that many centers will assign follow-up to remind staff and volunteers to follow up with clients after their pregnancy test or sonogram to get the final assessment information recorded. We've created a video that will walk you through how to set up the follow-up and how to use the Client File Follow-up report to print a list of files that have been marked for follow-up. For more information on that, I recommend that you watch the Client File Follow-up video in the Client Data Entry section of the Video Training Center. Next, let's talk about 2 different ways that centers can quickly identify clients who are still at risk. First, many centers use the case status report found in the client report section. The filters on this report will allow you to find clients who at last contact were still at risk. Centers then use the information in the report to create their list of clients to contact and follow up with. Lastly, I want to quickly demo another way to locate at-risk clients. To do that, I'll simply click on the Case tab right here. Now, from the Case tab, you can search for different client cases using these criteria. I'm going to click here to display the advanced criteria, and notice that I can filter on the current at-risk assessment, which again is the client advocate's assessment, and the client's last stated intentions. So let's say that I want to display clients whose at-risk assessment, again meaning the last one that was entered in, is abortion vulnerable. I'll select that, and next, notice that I can set a due date filter and only display client cases where the due date is between two dates. I'm going to select a from date, that's a few weeks in the future, and I'll select a to date, that's about 8 months from now. That way I can see all of my clients who are still at risk and are due within the next 8 months or so. Next, I'll select to only display open cases, and for the case outcome filter, I'll select to see only cases where no outcome, such as birth, miscarriage, or abortion, has been set. Okay, I'll click Apply, and notice the client cases that match the criteria are displayed. Let's go ahead and click here to open this client case. Notice her at-risk assessment information is immediately displayed along with her case information. I'll next click on the At-Risk Timeline tab, and you can see her timeline right here. Notice that this client is in stage 3. She has received a sonogram, and the client advocate has assessed her as abortion vulnerable after the sonogram, even though she stated that she intended to carry to term. To get more information on that, I can click Edit to open the sonogram form. I can read right here that she and her boyfriend wanted to have the child, but her parents are pressuring her to abort. So that's why the client advocate assessed her as being abortion vulnerable, because of the outside pressure from her parents. Okay, so next, let's say that I contacted this client via phone to follow up with her, and I learned that her parents, who were once pressuring her to abort, are now supporting her decision to have the baby. To record that information, I'll simply click Add New right here under the Final Assessment section. The Final Assessment form will open, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this information right here as is. I'm going to select Likely to Carry to Term, and I'll select that her stated intentions are that she intends to carry to term. I'll enter in a few comments right here, and then I'll click Save and Close. Notice that the current assessment status here in the header has changed and now shows that she is likely to carry to term and is in stage 4 of the at-risk timeline. Okay, well that's about it for the at-risk timeline. In summary, during this video, you learned how to track abortion risk in Centerpiece at each stage of the pregnancy support cycle within a case. You learned that abortion risk is the client's likelihood of getting an abortion. You also learned how to accurately assess and assign a client's abortion risk levels. You learned why it's important to track the risk levels, and you learned that the at-risk timeline helps you track and see the client's current assessment status, her risk levels at each stage of her pregnancy support cycle, and her changes over time, all on one easy-to-read page. You learned that you can utilize the client file follow-up to remind staff or volunteers to follow up with clients, and that the client file follow-up report will allow you to print out a list of follow-up tasks. You also learned that you can use the case status report and the cases grid under the client module to identify client cases where clients are still at risk. Please continue to watch the rest of the videos in the client data entry section to learn how to continue to build out and add information to your client file, including tracking and setting case outcomes. Thanks for your time.